Good evening, Jim.
Well, good evening, David. This
is we're meeting under really odd circumstances. Obviously, this is a normal episode night. I'm sure you've been seeing the flurry of social media stuff that's been going on, at least on YouTube and that kind of thing in the last 2 days.
Yeah, we're going to have to put this one out without worrying about editing it. We're just going to have to.
Yeah, we're gonna fly by the seat of our pants on this one because this one needs to come out in a reasonable time frame with regards to what's going on. So as you can no doubt tell, if you're watching this on YouTube, to the left of us, you can see our titles for the night. The title of the episode is R2 Vamps Doomed. And right. We're going to get into that. We want to do our what's new and stuff first, but just know that, we're going to cover that in its full legitimacy of all the information that we've probably heard in the last 2 days since the announcement went out from EHX. So, all right. So I got a what's new. I'll start because I know your what's new is quick.
Yes, mine is very quick.
So my neck arrived. This is my Wenge.
Oh, nice. That's that Wenge.
Wenge neck for the new Strat. Stainless steel frets. I got a 9.5 to 14-inch radius on it.
Jeez.
It's gonna be an interesting playing guitar because this is a Gibson scale neck. So Gibson scale conversion neck for my Fender Strat. It's going on a white body with a white pickguard. Yep. It's not really white anymore. Nice. It's like cream colored, but I held it up to it and I was like, ugh. But I think it's the pick guard. I think once I get an actual white pick guard on it, this is gonna pop a little more and it'll look cool. But I'm not really concerned about what it looks like. I bought it for stability. I bought it for tone. And for those of you who don't like me saying that, screw you.
That's right.
And
that's right.
It's going to make me want to play it better. I've never had a Wenge neck. I've had a couple in my hands over the years. This is actually really wild to actually finally own one that is going on a guitar. I kind of went back and forth on whether I wanted to do it because I know Wenge it's kind of a controversial wood choice because it's so hard. It's actually toxic. So if you were to sand this, it's irritating on your skin. And of course, it's unfinished. And you can't see it when I hold it up to the camera, but there are divots in this neck that look like cracks.
I can tell you right now, that looks gorgeous.
The figure is amazing, but I just can't wait to put that on a.
Thumbs up to Warmoth on that one. Yeah, well,
Warmoth always puts together excellent looking pieces. And I have a feeling that's going to be no different. I do know somebody who's had a warped Warmoth neck before, but it happens with everything. I mean, it's a piece of wood, right? So there's only so much you can do to prevent that. Anyway, that's my what's new. There may be more what's news incoming. Oh, actually, I do have another one. Tomorrow or Tuesday, I will be receiving a Celestia Neo Creamback. That's going to go in one of my Lone Star cabs, and then the C90 that's in it's going to go out to pay for it. But mostly because I don't need the C90 if I've already got a Creamback. And the reason was just to have a different speaker option for different venues, but also just to have something different to experiment, right? So don't know if you'll like them unless you have one. And I think it's a cool choice because they're super light, and the speaker's like 4 pounds. It's just
nice,
ridiculous. So. Anyway, Jim, show us your what's new.
Yep. Okay. So my what's new is relatively boring, but I want to talk about why it's important. So I bought these. My buddy Robert Jackson hooked me up with some pricing. Got me 5 sets of these. And I'll tell you why it's important to me. Because these little guys right here have become my favorite pick, right? But I can't find them locally for nothing.
We make shortages.
No. And so they're the Altex John Petrucci 3s. I get the feeling that these are the prime tone. These are going to go where, I mean, they have another one, but I get the feeling that what's happening is these are going to go to where they're just like not a John Petrucci model anymore.
Well, they already have, they already make prime tones.
Right. That's what I mean. And 1.38 millimeter thick.
I thought his was the shape. I thought there was something about the jazz
There's
shape.
about the shape, the shape that I like about this one. And I have one of these, and I've been beating the crap out of it, so I had to get some more. So obviously I bought a lot more. So yeah, I mean, we're talking shortages. I think it's important to get to the meat of what we're about to discuss. If you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to start off. I want to talk about Sino. So if you don't know, Sino, what's the second? Shigawang? Shigawang? I don't know how to pronounce the second name. But Sino, right? Which is the Chinese tube factory. They had a fire, and I think it was early 2021.
That's right.
That was, my understanding is near the factory, and actually caused some damage to the structure, which had them closed down, and that they have had that repaired, and that they are waiting on the Chinese government to sign off and approve them starting to manufacture stuff there. Now, it's now 2022, and this hasn't happened yet, which leads us to believe
not online.
Which leads us to believe that they may not ever come back online. And I really strongly believe that that's probably not going to happen. There's rumors that somebody bought the equipment there and was producing hi-fi tubes somewhere. I don't know if any of that's true. You can dig on the internet. You can look and find out about tubes in China, and you're going to find all this information that I'm sharing here in various forum entries. Because what happens in China stays in China. They don't talk about that kind of stuff, because you're not just buying from a Chinese company, you're also buying from the Chinese government, which is something I think is a little hard for people to wrap their head around. So. All right, now we get back to the other side of what's going on right now. If you didn't know, the 7 major tube brands that you can purchase today outside of JJ and Sino were all produced at I think it's the former Reflector factory, but it is now New Sensor in Russia. As you know, there is civil unrest in Ukraine caused by an invasion by the Russians. You can call it whatever you want. It's an invasion. They put military stuff on the ground and are actively waging war in the country. That is an invasion, not a military action. An invasion. Let's be very clear. Now, politics aside, right? I don't care how you perceive that situation. Obviously, we have an international audience. I'm sure there are people that have differing opinions. Politics aside on that. This creates a serious economic hurdle for us in the United States and likely in other regions of the world where Russia just basically banned the export of tubes. Yeah. And I think part of that, first off, I've seen people actually already having a discussion about why would Russia ban the export of tubes? Number one, it is something that will hurt us somewhat. Number two, very little, mind you. Number two, because guitar players are small piece of the overall picture, and really 12AX7, 6L6s, EL34s, that's basically us, right? There's not anybody else using these things anymore. It's us and studios. So what we have to keep our mind on is things like the new tube, or no, the nano tube rather, that Thomas Blug was exporting and installing in his equipment, which is, out of the cockpit of a Soviet MiG. I mean, he told us that. So
we talked to him.
That's a Russian surplus tube, and they're having a war, and they still rely on tube technology. Now, something that was kind of shocking to me, so I've been armchair following this war a little bit, and mostly because of my historical interests, but I'm actually having to separate from that because I'm having a lot of anxiety issues dealing with the fact that we basically have a real war going on in this world right now, like a real war, not like some fascist dictator trying to take over a country and just basically going and committing genocide, but a real war where people are like pitched battle and everybody could get involved before this is all over with. kind of thing, and it's starting to affect us, right? Like we're starting to see obviously everybody knows the gas prices are jumping and all that stuff. There are long-standing ramifications of this, but it was sort of shocking to me. I'm watching the armchair side of this war in the first day, and they started talking about the Russian tanks that were coming over the border, and they're all like tanks from the 80s, and it's like, what happened to all the stuff they parade around Red Square? Because they do their big military parades with all these brand new vehicles. They don't have any of that stuff. It's just pomp and circumstance for the televisions. Because they're still running T80s and T60s. I mean,
well, you got to remember that when it comes to, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole.
Right.
When it comes to showing things off, and this has been the case in America too, that. Sometimes they'll show off stuff that rolls, but it doesn't exactly work yet. I mean, and that's the point of the problem. That's the bigger problem.
Well, we have our own problems in our country. We had an amphibious assault vehicle actually submerged because it was not well maintained and kill Marines. That was a case that was decided in the courts, military courts this week. So
I am watching. Working for the military and working with the military, and obviously a lot of friends that are vets and some of them that are active duty. This is something that hits home every single day, and that we're watching with bated breath. So, I don't want to go any further than that.
Sure.
All I can say is that I just hope that cooler heads prevail and that things, work out. So we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled. But, and that's the thing, folks, we don't want anybody to think that we're sitting here going, oh my God, guitar tubes, that's just crazy.
No, we understand there's a large scale humanitarian issue here that we have to pay attention to, and that there are bigger things at play than guitar.
Right. But that's not what this podcast is about. Mm-hmm. But those things do exist, and we're not going to attack them or address them directly or indirectly, because, to be honest with you, that's something that is for historians and people much bigger than us, and much more intelligent and well, at least I don't know about some of them, but. With their hands on the pulse of things, hopefully. So the thing is, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the history, and then you can talk about the most recent history about what's going on. So the transistor came into life in 1947, 1948, somewhere in there, and so we're talking late 40s. We're talking, what is that, 80 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Or no, my mother's. 70 plus years ago, almost 80 years.
And the original transistors were not powerful enough to be used in audio applications. That's essentially what the deal was.
Right. So it wasn't until the 60s, 70s that the transistor really started to get into the homes that, the way we see them now.
It was
where they were miniaturizing things.
It was miniaturized. It was then cheap enough to produce them. They had now had enough power. They're cooler. Yeah. Brett Schultz said it best. He said, transistors realistically are better than tubes in every single way. But I'm going to add to his comment, but one. And that is the one we rely on. We prefer the sound of vacuum tubes. The vast majority of guitar players prefers the sound of vacuum tubes.
That's absolutely correct. So, go a little bit forward. Bass players used to use tube amps, and bass players have gone, to solid state. Keyboard players used tube amps. Keyboard players have gone solid state. You see where I'm going, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're the last bastion. We're the ones holding on like this, except for the like Dave Grohl and a couple other people who have Neve,
consoles,
boards, right? That are using tubes on their inputs, but they're not using tubes. I mean, they're using tubes, but not to the extent that we are. And so in that world, there's not that many Neve consoles or whatever consoles that also use tube inputs. So they're not really like, oh, we need a ton of them. You know,
Right.
probably 10,000 would do years of all the consoles that are out there that need them.
Right.
Where
and
there's probably
they don't use
10,000
the
guitar
same-
players right now going, oh shit, I have a tube amp that doesn't work.
They very rarely
Right.
use the same tubes as what's in a guitar amplifier. They might use
Right.
one of the less common ones, like an EF86 or a 12AT7 or 12AU7 or something like that, or they may even be solid state rectified. And actually, I want to start before we even start talking about it going any further. This right now in the short term, the bigger concern is power amp tubes. Because preamp tubes last a lot longer. They're not a high high stress application of a tube. And so therefore, your preamp tube could last 5,000
years.
5,000 hours. I mean, honestly, I see all the time deluxe reverbs from the 60s on reverb with the original preamp tubes. And it's I know people are like, well, it's new old stock so it lasts longer. Listen, preamp tubes, if they're built right and they pass quality muster, generally are going to last you the life of the amp.
Yep. I had a Fender. What the heck was the name? It's not the DeVille. I had a DeVille, and those tubes lasted. They were great from the time I bought it to the time I sold it, which was about 15 years. They were great. They sounded great.
Specifically the preamp tubes, though, right?
Yeah, very specific. I didn't push but that's just it, though. I was not pushing the power amp that hard, but we've got a lot of people that are using these amps that are like 1 watt, 5 watt, so on and so forth. They're pushing those power amps a lot harder.
Or anything that's purportedly A class is supposed to be running that tube full out the whole time.
Right.
And so those, I'll share my little background. So all of the tube amps I've ever owned have been modern, right? I've owned a Classic 30. I'm just going to rattle off some of them. I'm sure I'm going to leave some out. Classic 30, Hot Rod Deluxe. I had a Rivera R30. I got the Mesa Boogie Mark 525 and a Fillmore now. And a bunch of 5-watt tube amps, right? Epiphone Valve Jr., Vox AC4 TV, and a couple others that are in there too. But they had the Blackstar HT1R for a while, and a Marshall Class 5. Yeah, I've owned a lot of little amps. So in those applications, many of those 5-watt amps are running a single tube, single-ended, Class A. And I will say that in almost all of them, I replaced an EL84 or a 6V6, depending on what it was running, at some point during that amplifier's life. Because those tubes just get worn out, right? Because they're run full on the whole time. Classic 30, I did 2 sets. I had that amp for like 4 years. I did 2 sets of EL84s in that guy. 4 EL84s. I was like, damn, how do people run tube amps? This is expensive. Well, of course, obviously, I was a younger kid at that time. Now I'm like, no big deal. Yeah.
$75.
Yeah, whatever. Well, now it's in today's climate, it wouldn't be $75, but
no.
So the reason why I bring up the distinction between power amp and preamp tubes is because the prices are going to be different too. And quite frankly, you're always probably going to be able to find 12AX7s because somebody's going to have an amp that takes a shit that they don't repair, and you'll be able to pick up their 12AX7 for, pennies on the dollar.
Dimes. Yep.
And people still do go and hunt at auction and stuff, tube amps that are broken just to pull the tubes out of them.
Right. That's right.
So that's for the foreseeable future. Tubes are not going to dry up completely. But here's where, so if you've watched any of the social media coverage this weekend, we'll get into the nitty gritty of what's really going on now. So as of Friday, it was announced that Russia has decided that they're not going to export tubes. And so EHX issued a statement saying, we will no longer be allowed to import tubes for the remainder of the year. We do not know when the operations will continue, if they continue.
Right. There's two major points that are in their press release. One, like you said, they don't know when they're going to continue or if they're going to continue. But the other thing, if you read it, they said it's been a struggle for a long time. It's been expensive and difficult for a long time. The legalities have been difficult for a long time. So therefore, I'm not so sure they want to get back in that business.
I think Mike Matthews is making it really, really clear in his messaging that even if this sorts itself out, he will not be the guy that's the primary distributor for the United States, which is basically what happened. So we didn't get into that part of the history. So in the 1980s, tubes started to decline because transistors started to take over. And that was more or less just because tube manufacturing in the United States was ceasing to exist, right? Most of it was already done at that point. By the 1970s, really, tube companies were just selling new old stock stuff they had. And we're really not producing much.
Yeah, a lot of the applications, when you get outside of the guitar, folks, a lot of the applications for tubes were already moved outside the United States. I think it was, the 70s, when I remember a teacher telling me, I'm pretty sure it was the mid-70s, that there were no more televisions built in the United States.
Yeah.
So that was one of your biggest tube users still at that point.
Mm-hmm. I used to pull tubes out of old televisions when I'd see them.
Right. TVs, cathode rays, those type of things, we're still using tubes. So now we've got what is left using tubes? Well, high power radio, which was already moved over to Asia, and guitar stuff, music stuff.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
So in the 80s, right, like companies like PV, who were still making tube amps at the time, started to realize, oh, crap. This is not becoming a viable possibility for inexpensive amps. By the end of the decade, there'd been this massive shift towards even high-end solid-state amplification. Now, this has always been going on, right? So there's companies like Legend and even Vox dabbled with solid-state AC30s in the 70s and 80s. Carvin, of course, had a line of solid-state amps that were highly sought after, or at least highly thought of at the time.
Right.
And you could still find some of these amps, and they're kind of interesting. Like the Legend actually was one that was endorsed by Billy Gibbons, of all people. Yeah. And he used it on the record, and like it was a whole thing. But you ever run into one of those cool amps? Check them out. But so we have the shift, right? And that was mostly caused by the fact people weren't sure where they were going to get tubes from anymore. So the boutique thing starts taking off out of the vintage guitar stuff in the late 80s, and people start buying vintage amplifiers, and they start getting, the itch to find new production tubes. Well, the only countries that were still producing tubes at that time were really Russia and China. And the Russian tube factory, which I believe was called Reflector, now called New Sensor, actually went belly up. And because of Mike Matthews, who owns Electro Harmonics, because he'd already had relationships with business in Russia, he bought the factory because he knew musicians still needed it. And it was a lucrative business opportunity. Let's not pretend that he did it as a service to the world. He did it because he's going to make money.
Of his heart. Right. He's got to buy that. He's got to buy his weed somewhere. So and he needs that money somewhere.
Weed and acid and whatever else he's doing.
Yeah.
But
he's high most of the time.
he's a funny guy. But anyway,
I'm sure
there was a long history of problems between him and the Russian mob, and also the KGB, which is now I forget, it's like secret police or something now. It's not the KGB anymore, and he paid people off. Let's just put it this way: the problem disappeared. And it was almost, and the courts just suddenly flipped for him, which suggests that he basically just greased palms to make it go away. Right. Now,
can I interject for just a second?
Sure.
So I have a friend of mine I grew up with in high school. He lives in China now, and he's an import-export lawyer in China. let's just say money talks, and we'll just go from there. Yeah, go ahead with your story. But speaking from personal experience, than someone who told me, this is how he gets work done. It's all about who you grease the palms
and
of.
How many suitcases of cash you could flow into the country.
That's it.
So now that New Sensor is gone, because I'm just chalking up New Sensor's over, right?
Yeah.
The only chance that we have of ever seeing tubes from New Sensor again is that New Sensor does business with an intermediary country that is neither friend nor foe to Russia.
A Switzerland type thing.
Rebrands the tubes, and somehow we're buying them here in the States, which is going to be tremendous markup, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be harder to find than JJ will be. Which is something I want to make very clear. Like, we all know that there is still a tube factory that remains, but we're going to talk about why that's a non-issue in this, and the serious ramifications on the industry itself at this time. So Sino's been gone since 2021. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, Mesa Boogie's supplies of tubes dried up a while ago. My local dealer had a stash. And between me and my friends, we've pretty much cleaned them out at this point. And I have tubes on order. I'm never going to see them. Like, I honestly know that I'm never going to see them. That order is going to get canceled. This is what's going to happen. They're going to cancel it. Yep. I'm not going to cancel it. They're going to cancel it because I will wait until they show up. But I have some spares, but like, I'm already sort of in the mindset that this is not sustainable behavior. And I know because, look, I'm not a vintage guy. I'm not going to hunt down tubes and pay $400 a tube. That's just wildly insane. And that's actually what's happened to, if you want new old stock tubes, if you believe that the tube fairies sprinkle fairy dust on tubes because they're old, you're paying about $400 a tube right now.
I'm looking at tubes online right now at Amazon. $185 for some of this. I mean, one 6L6 groove tube, 6L6, $114. Another 6L6S medium, $185.
Well, I mean, so like people have said, well, Tube Amp Depot hasn't got bigger prices. And I laugh and I'm like, did you look to see what they have in stock? Because they have nothing, which is why they haven't updated their prices. And when they will finally show up, their prices will go through the roof because there's no point in them updating the prices until they know what the supply or the demand and the supply is going to be like.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that I do recommend people, we don't normally tell people go watch Rhett Shell's videos, but go watch Rhett Shell's video. And one of the things that he noted in his video, I'm pretty sure it was his video.
The one scary fact, and I know exactly what you're going to say. Go for it.
Am I? Okay. He said that, he was talking about the same thing we're talking about right now. You can order tubes, but it's highly unlikely that they're going to have them in stock or that they're actually going to go through with it, get them. But more importantly, Fender has shut down half of their production
and
of
they're
tube
looking
amplifiers.
To shut down a quarter. They're going to go down to a quarter.
Yeah.
You're talking about the single largest tube manufacturing company in the country. Is basically saying we can't produce amplifiers because we can't get parts. Period.
Yep.
And so I was trying to rationalize this to my wife, right? And I know that this is like she gets it, right? She totally gets it. And I'm like,
hold on to your Fender tube amps, guys. That's all I'm gonna say.
If you got one, hold them while you got them. Hold them while you got them. So we'll talk about Marshall too, because that's a whole other can of worms. But Fender saying this is scary because it's a big company, right? So like big company's going to do this first. Small company like Friedman or somebody like that, they're not so intimidated yet. But what that tells you is Fender can't buy large lots of tubes. Large lots, right? So it's not about, I want to make this very clear. It's not about Fender being able to get any tubes, because if they couldn't get any tubes, the custom shop would no longer take tube orders or anything like that. They wouldn't build tube amps. The bigger issue at large is they can't get large lots. So singular tubes are probably available to manufacturers, small lots. are probably still available to companies. This is going to absolutely brutalize the industry over the next 6 months. You're going to see companies going belly up. Just get ready for it, because they're not going to be. And on top of that, if you have an order in for a waitlisted amp, you might want to call and get your deposit back if you can.
Yep.
Because I can tell you right now, with all of these companies and this climate we're in, if they are not sitting on a tremendous stock of tubes already, you're not seeing your amp. It's not going to happen, because they don't. Who do you think is going to get priority? Big order from Fender or tiny order from Dr. Z?
I can tell you right now, this is how amazing this is right now, and this price is only going to go up. I bought my Fender Blues Junior 2 years ago, right? About 2 years ago. I didn't even pay $500 for it. Okay, just let you know. They're $800 right now.
So
and that number is going to go up.
The number is going to go up. That price increase was the inflationary price increase,
That's right?
Just from the normal inflation. They haven't had time to address the situation of shipping costs going up, tubes not being available.
That's right. If you can get an amplifier, if you've been on the fence about getting a tube amp that's in stock right now, I would buy it.
Just get it.
Honestly.
So get it if you are committed to supplying it with tubes, despite the economic climate. Remember that if you buy a Blues Junior at $800, you could be paying $800 to retube that damn thing.
For tubes, 10, 15 years down the road or whatever, however long it lasts.
Yeah, right. And so
it might be 3-4 years.
And honestly, you might get to a point where you literally can't get tubes for it. And that is.
But you know what somebody smart's going to do? Someone smart is going to come up with a solid state replacement for the tube. So it's been done. It didn't go well. So they have the yellow jackets, right, which are a tube converter. Somebody was telling me a while back that in the 70s somebody prototyped up like a replacement for an EL. It was probably not an EL34. It's probably a 6L6, and that like it was basically just transistorizing the amp the same way that you would buying a solid state amp. In which case, it doesn't really make sense to use the existing hardware to, you know what I'm saying? Like at that point, you might as well just buy a solid state amp. Now, if they could do it cheaply and make it function like a tube amp, that's one thing. But I really don't think that's the reality here. We have the future right in front of us. We've had it, and we've been talking about it on the show for 5 years, and it's existed for 15, and it's digital amps. But the reality hasn't set in for these companies that they're going to have to dump every dime into that in order to get it off the ground finally, so that people can have the Katana-like experience. And I mean a digital amp, knobs right on the front, that is not identical, but better than an existing tube amp. Because in order to get people to adopt it, you can't just sell a copy. This is why if you go on Reverb right now, you'll find there's 15 or something Tone Masters up for sale right now. Because even though the Tone Master has been a successful amp for them, people aren't keeping them. And I can find videos on YouTube right now of people doing comparisons and going, Tone Master's ass. Like, it's really bad. So I don't prescribe to that theory. I think that each thing has its place. I suspect that the firmware update that happened with Tone Master probably improved it significantly. And I also suspect that some of that is just tube snob bias. But like, I really think that kind of thing is the future. It's not the Line 6 Catalyst with menu. Well, it doesn't have menus on it, but like with deep dive editing and that kind of thing. It's going to be an amp that looks like a freaking amp that uses digital stuff to produce the sounds out of it. And maybe a voicing knob to go from Marshall to Fender or something like that. It's going to be very, very simple. It's not going to be, here's your 128 effect parameters and granted,
I mean, there's a time and a place for that kind of amp too, and it's not going to dry up completely. But for the vast majority of people who are older who are still buying tube amps, that has to exist in order to get them out of tube amps. You know what's really funny? Yeah. People that are in that mindset, I got to have something simple. I see them using solid state amps all the time, but I never see them touching anything digital because it's like solid state's basically the same thing as a tube amp, except it doesn't sound the same. And they sort of could wrap their head around that idea of it, right? But it's like a second you start talking about modulation effects and adjusting parameters and saving presets, they start
right.
Nah, I ain't nope.
Right. Well, you and I have both had the Kemper. We've both owned a Helix. We have both had Katanas, okay? And
I'm trying really hard not to turn beat red here right now.
It's okay. And I own a Tone Master. Which you could call it a Toast Master, whatever. Toast Maker.
The Ass Master.
Yep, the Ass Master. I have two tube amps. I've got my Marshall DSL, and I've got my what do you call it? So, and I have the Kemper, and I have the Tone Master, and I have the what do you call it? I got to be honest with you. I'm fine with the Tone Master. I've used it. I've used it out. I've used it. I'm fine with it. Here's the thing that I like about the Tone Master, above even a Katana, which I like. You know, I love the Katana, and I really like my Kemper. Here's the pluses and minuses of everything, and then I want to keep going forward with what we're talking about. What's the tube thing? Because we got to get to what Marshall is going. So here's the thing that I like. The Tone Master is nice and easy. I set it up just like any other tube amp. I plug my pedals into it just like any other tube amp, and I play it just like any other tube amp. That's what I love about it. Okay, that's it. Now, I Kemper for the same reason, but you've asked me this question. Why didn't you use Kemper at this point, at this point, at this point? And I'm like, because I have a sound person that I can't trust. That's why at those points, and I can only use it when I have a sound person I can trust.
Yeah, I mean that was my gripe with it too.
Yep, and so what's great about the Katana? Simple setup, fire it up, play it on stages that are small, that are open mics. Katana's hard to beat.
It's light. You don't care if somebody spills a beer on it because it's only going to cost you $200.
Exactly. It's just something that I really enjoy. Now, I want to go to the last point, and then I'll let you take over. And so, what do I like about my two tube amps? What I would like about any tube amp. That's what I love about them. Now, there's always a wave, right? When you create a wave, there's going to be this wave. This is the crest of the wave right now. We're reaching a crest of a wave, and that is that crest right now. Notice waves do this, right? The crest moves out. And it may get smaller as it moves out, but it's gonna move out. All right, this is what I want to say. You've got tubes, hard to get. Then tube amps, gonna be hard to get. You wait 6 months, and it's gonna be really hard to get a tube amp.
It's already hard.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And now, well, see, tubes were already hard to get. That's what people forgot.
I mean, Jim, the amps are hard to get. We have a listener who's had a Mesa Boogie on order now for over a year.
I had one.
Yeah.
So we'll talk.
I mean, this is not new. This has been going on.
I know.
It's a result of what happened in 2020, still spiraling out of control.
That's correct. And those tubes didn't disappear overnight. It wasn't like it.
No.
Kind of like anything else. Those tubes did not disappear overnight. They've been disappearing for a while. It was just this rush of people, kind of like toilet paper. But anyway, now the next thing, the next wave, it's going to be the amps. But the next wave, this is what's going to be funny. This is what I'm going to laugh at. Because the next wave is going to be all these things that replace tube amps. Your Katanas, your Helixes, your Kempers, your Axe effects, those things are, because they were I'm too good for that. Now all of a sudden it's going to be, oh shit, I need something. And that is going to be the thing that people need.
I have been looking at one of those products all day.
Yes, you have. Matter of fact, I'm going to look at one right now.
No, Jim, multiple products. One I told you about, and another one that is significantly more money. Where I was like, I've had everything else. Why not? And so this is my take on this, right? So like, I absolutely do not want to give up my tube amps. No way in hell. I have had the Kemper. I've had the Helix. I've had 2 Katanas. I have had all manner of digital devices before that. I mean, my first big amp was a Flextone 3XL. I've had a Line 6 Pod XT. I believe I had the Pod HD at some point. I know I played around with one for an extended period of time. I even had the Super Champ XD, which these all had some sort of digital componentry in these things. And I played with, I'm a recording engineer sort of off and on by just horsing around and also like recording my own bands and stuff. And like I played with plugins for a number of years, and I can tell you 100% verbatim that none of those things, none of them, I don't care if it's the Axe Effects, has anything on having an amp that blows your damn pant legs on stage. I agree with you. It is a visceral, inspiring feeling. But even I, having gone through the journey that I have gone on and the amount of money I have wasted, and I will say that, wasted with such viscera, even I am sitting here thinking, do I buy an Amp 1? Do I buy an Axe Effects right now? Because I know that in 3 weeks' time, you will not be able to get them. That is what is going to happen. They will not be available. And we're talking not in 3 months, we're talking 6 months to a year. Because there are too many people that are coming out of the pandemic in our country right now saying, I'm playing out this summer, and then realizing my amp is sat in the shed and it needs new tubes because either something broke or maybe they just wore them out, or, so we had this, as an aside, we had a Facebook listener, also guest of the show, Nick Bonger, suggests that, tube amp life is thousands of hours. And that's true. Tubes last thousands of hours. However, function versus peak function are two completely different things. And number two, that is assuming that tube is the same quality as the spec sheet that backs it up. And 99% of the time, that is not the case. Because if you're using a new production tube, you're using a tube built with the dies used to make those tubes 40 years ago. And those dies were only supposed to last for 5 years of production. So that tells you they've fallen apart. And if you want to know where I'm getting this information from, I'm not pulling things out of my ass. You can go talk to people like Dr. Z. You can go talk to any of these people. They'd love to have a conversation with you about it. And especially now, because they're going to have plenty of free time.
I'm sure Thomas Blug is home going, the money's coming.
So Blug's screwed too. I've already spoken with Amp 1 because they said they can't get any more of the.
No, they can't.
Now, they already have an out, and I already know how they would do it. But because I understand how they're using that tube based on our conversations with him, and he's an engineering mind. You will not. I'm confident you will not see a 100% solid state version, because it basically is a solid state amp, and he was very upfront with us on that. The Amp 1 will have probably a new tube in it, maybe a series of new tubes to replace the military tube that was in the originals. Will it be the same? I'm thinking probably yes, because ultimately he told us that tube is actually not that important to the unit. It was there to impart a little bit of compression and warm up the sound as it heads into the Class D amplifier section of the Amp 1. Also used to simulate the push-pull of tube amps, transformer, and speaker that goes on in an amplifier circuit that does not go on in your typical Class D transistor, or Class AB transistor solid-state circuit.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
a lot of technical jargon there. Sorry. But just they're not the same thing. They don't function the same way. And he's figured out a way to emulate that. So.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting information. Let's talk about Marshall and then talk about that.
Yeah, why don't you take on Marshall for a minute? Because and if you want me, I can do it. But my comments about Marshall are strictly related to tubes. But
my comments about Marshall is going to be strictly related to since Jim Marshall has passed away. Marshall is not the same company.
Hell no, hell no.
And actually, probably a little bit before that, Marshall has not really innovated. They're not really coming out with anything, Even
the amp you use is based on a design that was popularized in the early 2000s and late 90s.
Late 90s. Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. So and I love this amp. They've made minor tweaks to it. The minor tweaks are what I love about it now. But the truth of the matter is, they haven't done anything in 20 years.
Yeah, they have. So. Jim, they just released a goddamn jukebox.
Yeah. And there was the Origin.
The refrigerator.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
What about the cell phone?
I know.
And the Bluetooth speaker.
Right, that Bluetooth speaker that you gotta have.
Wait a minute. They haven't made like a guitar amp, an actual dyed-in-the-wool good guitar, good guitar amp, other than Origins, which is terrible.
Origin, which is really, just let's take the old circuit and not do it as well.
Now you said it right. Not do it as well. Yeah, because they're bad. You can like them if you want. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you my opinion. I'm going to tell our listeners my opinion. Origin is a waste of space. There's a waste of retail space. They should get a good amp to put in place of Origin, because Origin is bad. And I know people are buying these things, and I'm just kind of like, you can buy a Supra, right? Like, the Blues King is over there. You'd probably rather have that. Or, if you really want a British sounding amp, there's over there in the corner is an Orange. I know it's a crush, but it's still better than that.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, I think other than, what was it, the Satriani model, which was a long time ago.
The JVM was the last new amp.
The last good new amp, other than the DSL and the JVM, and really the DSL is the working man's. I mean, when I say working man's, you know what I mean, like the everyman's, the poor man's.
I think the DSL, to be honest with you, was a really good amp when it came out. And I think they got eclipsed a long time ago on that thing. And they brought out, so that when they did the redesign, they added the reverb, right? That's the one you have. They did tweak the circuit and made it more modern to compete with Friedman. But it's an inexpensive Friedman now is what it is.
Yeah, it really is an inexpensive Friedman. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, the only reason I do prefer it is that I like the fact that it's got, which is a weird reason to prefer it, but I like the fact that it's got two master volumes, which means I can run a lead channel and another channel without actually changing the tone all that much.
Right.
Now, again, until I get it to that visceral point where I'm pushing the pant legs, I mean, I'm literally feeling it doesn't really.
No,
that's a non-issue.
But no amp sounds good until it's peeling paint. Let's be real.
Right.
Let's be real for a minute. I mean, I can play my Mark 525 here at the house, but I could also scratch my nails on a chalkboard too.
Right. And luckily in April, I'm going to get to turn this bad boy up again. But hopefully I won't blow a tube. I will have a Kemper with me. But the point is that like you said. This is dangerous, and the scary thing is Marshall isn't like Fender. I mean, and we haven't even talked about Vox or any of the boutiques, but Marshall isn't like Fender. Marshall does not have.
They have zero infrastructure to suddenly pivot and start producing quality. They have a solid state line, the MG line. It has basically remained unchanged for 30 years.
Yeah, the 90s.
and it's not highly thought of. Okay, it wasn't highly thought of back then.
Nope.
So, along with what you're saying, Jim, they brought out Code, and everybody knows Code was. This may very well be the death knell for Marshall. The name will always exist. Someone will buy them, but I just, how do you keep producing garbage and products that don't fit your industry? There's only so many people with disposable income left in the world. If you haven't been paying attention, the middle class is shrinking, whether you like to admit it or not. And I'd like to think that, the middle class didn't necessarily always struggle the way they struggle today. I've spoken to many folks who make middle class income based on the statistics that are assigned to them, who are living paycheck to paycheck. Many of them are musicians. And I hesitate to think that Marshall is a company that is trying to market products to them. And I see Fender still does. That's why the Squire line is so strong. That's why they still have the Hot Rod and the Blues Junior and the Mustang series and all these different amps that cater to the lower end of the market. They have a very broad strategy. But the one that I'm like, what is going to happen now? Gibson just acquired Mesa Boogie. Nobody knows what that deal was. Mesa Boogie was
thinking about that this
profitable company, and so they paid good money. And now Mesa Boogie's total expertise is in tube engineering. Anything digital, they're farming out to 2 notes right now, and anything solid state, they're buying ice power and plugging it into their amplifiers, because they're all Class D, right? Anything Class D, just read ice power. That's what it is.
Right.
So what happens to Mesa Boogie? Like, are they going to reissue the Lab series for Gibson? I mean, honestly, like, I'm just kind of like, what other option do they have?
I can see a lot of these tube companies or tube amp companies that were doing this, bringing in those SKUs. We're going to bring them into a few, and we're only going to put out so many amps a year. We're going to charge this much for them, and we're going to see them become pro level only.
It's a luxury pro level item, and I would say if you have a reasonable high end tube amp, high end being over $1,000, hang on to it, tube it, play it when you can. I would say keep it in working order, and at some point you're going to be sitting on a car, because that's what that stuff's going to start going for. A functional tube amp is going to start being really good money. Even if it's just for them to cannibalize the tubes out of your amp. The reality is you're sitting on a gold mine. And I think that's a very real possibility. Now, of course, look, I fully understand that this may be a total overreaction from people in the community and the industry, but it doesn't look good. This is quite frankly the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in the guitar industry happen in the entire time I played guitar, which is from like 2000-ish to now, right? So that's saying a lot. I'm dating myself. I've played for quite some time now, over 20 years, and I'm kind of in shock. Like, I literally spent the entire day sort of pulling my hair out, because I saw last night, so my journey through this was Friday. Okay, so back up. 2 months ago, I was at a guitar shop, and I think we mentioned on that maybe the last episode that aired, I was with Mike Mara and Jeff Biazadecki at Good Time Music, and Mike actually bought the last box of 6L6 tubes they had, which I was asking, do you guys got any tubes? And they're like, no, we just gave them the last box. I'm like, shit. Now I have a set, right? But I figured I better get another set just in case, because I knew I knew about Sino. I knew Mesa was having trouble getting tubes out. So fast forward, I was like, oh, wait, I'll get them when I need them. I was on Sweetwater looking around like, maybe I should just order some tubes one day, and I didn't. And then I heard about the Ukrainian invasion. I said, oh, shit. And as soon as that happened, I went, I got to buy tubes now. So I literally went to, I was Reuters on one side of my monitor, very vivid. Reuters on one side, Sweetwater on the other, and I'm buying 6L6s, EL84s. And they're sitting in I didn't pay for them yet, but they're sitting in my order list. As soon as they come, I get paid, I pay for them. And I, now 2 weeks later, right, we start hearing this news, and I'm like, that's why I ordered them, because maybe there's still a boat, maybe they're still on their way over, and I will get the final remnants of what comes in, and that's still a possibility. But this changes everything. So this is the title of this segment is what the hell. And I capitalized H for a reason. What the hell do we do now? And I mean, I guess we just continue to nurse our amps that sort of half work as long as we can. We start to wait because here's the other thing. Unless you're comfortable going to an FR based solution, flat range, full response for those of you not initiated, there isn't a product for professional musicians built on solid state amplification. There isn't. It just doesn't exist. Okay. Closest items are like the Orange Super Crush, which is a 100-watt head that or 120-watt head that they just came out with. There is like the Marshall MG stuff where you could get the 100-watt head over there. I don't know why you would. There's the Katana 100, I guess. You could do the head, right? Katana Artist. Again, these are all sub $500 amplifiers, right? These were never intended to be your primary gigging solution. They were always intended to be either your entry into guitar or your backup, right? And now we're talking about using this stuff as a primary. There's just not enough solid state or hybrid or... so you got solid state, high end stuff. Quilter, Amp 1, which is arguable, right? Because Amp 1 still has a tube in it, which is negligible. And I really can't think of much else, right? Even in the preamp pedal world, like if you're going to get preamp pedals and run them into a power amp or something, you're still looking at tubes in the preamps now. I mean, I have one of the few, you can't see it in the frame, but back up there on my shelf, I have the Ethos Overdrive, which is like one of the few solid state, high quality thought of preamps. And you could go, or you can go digital, right? So you got HX Stomp and a power amp, you got Helix and a power amp, you've got the Axe Effects, right? Or FM3, FM9 from Fractal. You got Quad Cortex, which is a half-working platform, or you have Kemper, which is built on technology from 2007. I'm so far out of Kemper land now that I'm like, when was it? When did that come out? I think it was 2007. So like when you stop and you put all of that into perspective, is it 2007 or 2013? It's like. It's a long time ago. It's over, almost 10 years at this point. So, I mean, we know what you're going to do, right? Like, you'll just continue to use the Kemper and make do until something changes. So let's talk about positive. What could happen, right? Best case scenario, JJ gets an influx of cash from the orders that they're receiving from third parties and actually doubles the size of their manufacturing facility and becomes the tube manufacturer for the world. That's probably best case scenario. However, there are some reasons why I don't think this is going to happen. Number one is JJ is in Slovakia. And you can read about Slovakia's climate, not their political climate, and what's going on there. I don't think they're going to be growing that much. And I think they actually have pretty significant threat from the Soviet Union as well. But Soviet Union, the Russian Federation. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. Russian Federation. So that is where I would think that ends in reality. But Uli Behringer's still out there somewhere, and he has ties to China, and he has already rescued bucket brigade chips for use in his own stuff and also to sell to third parties. Korg is another dark horse in the race because Korg has new tube. They are clearly still interested in maintaining vacuum tube technology to some extent. It sells products for them, and they have patented items that do similar things. Even somebody, and this is going to sound wild and like far-fetched, but even a company like Microsoft might, because they're maybe not Microsoft, maybe somebody affiliated with Microsoft. The guy that owns the Experience Music Project is really into music awareness and stuff, and maybe he goes in and rescues us or something like that by starting a tube manufacturing plant in an area of the world that doesn't care about environmental concerns. I
hate to say this. I'm going to clean my lens real quick.
Oh, yeah.
I hate to say this, but there's a possibility that some of the big the tube companies, the manufacturers of tube amps, to keep their doors open, to stay afloat, keep going, they might have to build a conglomerate that they all VC into, and then that company becomes their...
You could see that. You could see a grassroots level...
Honestly, I mean, it's the one
thing...
Tube Amp
Association, where, they're all a member, and the sole responsibility is to manufacture the product they need so that they can all have it.
In a country where they don't care about the environment.
So
because that's the other thing we haven't talked about is how bad tubes are.
I was just going to go there. So we've all been looking at this perspective. It's like, what the hell do we do now? The idea that we can't continue to do what we've been doing because it no longer exists. But I'm going to ask a question that I think we all need to sort of ponder, and that is, should we?
Right.
Because the reason tubes are no longer made in the United States is because they're terrible for the environment. I mean, they create a tremendous amount of waste in the manufacturing process because you make 20 tubes, 2 of them are good, you throw the rest in the trash. That's how the manufacturing. Now, today we would recycle them, obviously, but recycling tubes is not easy.
And they recycle probably the glass. That's about it.
Well, you would recycle the glass, you would recycle the metal and the filament and the filaments.
That's what I was going to say, and the filament.
Yep. Which basically, that's all a tube is. There's not very much, because it's all heat and stuff inside. There's not really much other than that they would need to address. But it's still, you've got to sort three cycles of waste. Do they use chemical? Yeah, I forget what chemicals it is.
Gas in there.
Yeah, I forget what. Well, it's the gas mostly that would be the issue because it's not a good gas for the environment, which is where the environmental issues come in. I forget what it is.
No, if you think cow farts are bad, let me tell you something. But I mean, the truth of the matter is that they're not great for the environment.
Wait, and there's gas in a vacuum tube?
I believe so.
I think they use it in the manufacturing process, but I think the tube is actually a vacuum inside with chemical like heating element and all that stuff. I know they use. So that it's like the silver area at the top is something they add to the chemical, or they add to the inside of the tube to help seal it up and stuff. I watched this whole thing on the manufacturer. You can go watch too. It's interesting stuff. There are actually people that make tubes at home for like old radios and stuff. That is completely asinine. And that might actually be the way our industry is headed, is that some guy in, some European country, you call him up and you're like, I need 2 6L6s. And he's like, I'll make you 2 6L6s. The charge is $1,000 each. You will have to wait 9 months for me to blow the glass and to quality test them. And you're like, all right, that could be where we're headed, because the process takes hours if you do it by hand. 8 to 12 hours, I think they said. And the failure rate is like 70%. I mean, it's just wild that people would ever attempt that. But if you can't find those tubes ever again, and you're an electronics guy, and you have an old radio or something that you want to get working, it's your only option. And I think that's what is going to eventually happen to our industry, is there's going to be this small cottage industry of people 100 years from now blowing glass and inserting little metal pieces inside, so that they can, continue to enjoy the sound of analog audio, even as a museum piece, right? So the other concerns are that is the behavior of doing business with countries like China and Russia, who have little regard for the environment, have notable, human rights black marks on their records, and have sort of shady business practice. I mean, we were talking about Mike Matthews allegedly paying off Russian gangsters to leave him alone. Is it worth it? Like, are those things worth it in light of what we have available to us as technological options to continue beyond tube amps? And the other question is sustainability. I mean, look at your voltage draw from a tube amp. I know this is like a really stupid, silly argument, because there's no way in God's green earth that tube amps draw more power than your car burns gasoline, right? But
right.
If you're drawing power from the wall, it's coming from fossil fuel, okay? And so realistically, if we want to get environmentally conscious, and we're going to talk about the production of tubes, we also have to consider that tube amps are tremendous consumers of energy. Whereas something that's Class D, solid state, I mean, they don't use it. They're like Energy Star certified. They don't use nothing. It's peanuts. You can power them off batteries, which is pretty wild considering the amount of output that they create. But therein lies the conundrums, right? So we don't stop to consider, like, we just think, oh, well, the art we make with these is fantastic and it's a necessary thing for the world. But we never stop to consider the evil, quote unquote, because I'm being sort of devil's advocate here. I also understand that, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a drop in the bucket. But we never stop to consider the evil of what we're doing. It's just like our search for ebony, specifically black ebony, basically robbed the world of all its ebony forests. And I mean, there's Bob Taylor basically standing between us and destroying the ebony population of the rest of the world. He has literally the last ebony forest under his control. And we've talked about it on the show before. But basically, the reason that Taylors always have ugly ebony, like with brown streaks in it, whatever, which I actually think is gorgeous, frankly, but a lot of people consider ugly. The reason why they use the ugly ebony is because they're like, hell no, we are not cutting down ebony trees here unsustainably. I sort of feel like if they are using gases and stuff in here, it could be like hydrogen or helium, where we have a helium shortage. There's only a finite amount of helium on Earth. And,
and believe it or not, most people think that helium goes in balloons. A lot of helium goes to medical facilities. So it gets used more in medical facilities than you might think.
I would rather see it used there than birthday balloons, quite frankly.
Right. Well, the truth of the matter is that whether you're using a tube, a vacuum tube that has gas or doesn't have gas, there's inert gases such as argon, helium, neon.
I think argon is used in the manufacture of tubes. You say that,
right? But they do have stuff in there that's for capacitance, and that capacitance is So there has to be chemicals in there because that's a capacitor has chemicals in it. So there's whether they are part of the vacuum or in the in the base of the tube.
Right. There's definitely
anode, diode, whatever.
Right, but I'm just saying that like they use the vacuum because otherwise the electrons can't flow freely.
That's correct.
In the crystal lattice.
Right. And but
rest in peace, Dumble. Rest in peace.
Yeah, exactly. But the fact of the matter is that regardless, there's a reason that tubes have been being built in countries that don't take their environmental concerns seriously,
or the health concerns of their employees.
That's right, or the health concerns of their employees. And I'm not saying that we're perfect. That's for gosh darn sure. I'm just saying that as much as we do.
Well, yeah, but we're so far removed from it at this point that it's almost like that's why we don't even know,
Right. Well, that's why we could talk about the electric car and the what are the long terms of the batteries that are going to come in and out of there. We could talk about that. We could talk about cell phones and the bazillions of batteries that have gone in and out of these things.
Yeah, that we pretend like they don't exist and they're environmentally friendly, but
every single little think about the fact that I wear a cell phone, a watch that's got a lithium-ion battery and earbuds and then I'm using a computer that's got these
lithium polymer battery and so there's we all have a footprint, right?
And here's the other thing we don't think about much, and this is the other part of things this is that wave I was talking about. So we've talked about the tubes. Here's something we haven't talked about is plastic.
Right. Oh, I was just going to say that's the next thing, because anything that we make out of plastic, including PA speaker cabinets, is not renewable.
That's right. And what has it got in plastic? What is a primary
petroleum
oil, folks? And now, I'm not a chemist. I know that those things have changed over the years. The amount of petroleum that goes into plastic has changed over the years.
Plant-based plastics and stuff now, but they're not widespread, and they're usually very expensive or have drawbacks to structural stability and things like that. So we still continue to use a lot of oil petroleum.
Even as little as these things right here, I'm sure have some petroleum products in them. This is going to reach a lot further than we think. And we haven't even talked about, and we wouldn't because... I would want to talk to someone that's an engineer on the, which I can make some phone calls, for transistors and what goes into those and what because my daughter used to. So I worked IT for a company that built capacitors. So all we did was build capacitors. We built anything else.
Some fun chemicals and capacitors.
Let's just say that those chemicals are not good for you. And we had dry rooms and clean rooms and all kinds of stuff that went on. These were high capacity capacitors. And the fact is, my daughter worked there, and she actually built them. She was one of the people that mixed and created capacitors. And they go in the. Let me tell you something. There's some weird capacitors going to strangest places you would never think about. Your printer, your laptop, the battery that's in your laptop, all the stuff that goes out here. We haven't even touched on any of this stuff. And the fact is that all these things that we're talking about, everything has a wave effect that's going to go out. And we're going to create where there's a vacuum. Of course, we're talking about tubes.
Yeah.
Where there's a vacuum, something will fill it. And whatever fills it then becomes the item that becomes desirable. And then because that's desirable, we've moved into the next thing. Now, of course, Shull talks about, and I don't know because I'm not young enough to know if this is real, but Shull is talking about how there's a lot of young people that are just using plugins. They don't have an amp at all.
There is, I definitely run into people that are like, you mean you actually use an amplifier? Like,
okay, boomer.
Yeah, it's like my boomer bends are showing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I actually am a boomer. I'm one of the last boomers, but because of my birth year. Anyway, it's one of those things that's weird, to me is the thought of using just a plug-in, which I get. If I was just sitting here, I could just plug into my Focusrite and go, I probably would. But the truth of the matter is, I'd rather just plug into the temper on the floor here, pointing down where you can't see, but or even power up my PS4 and play through Rocksmith. I mean, and I've done that. I've powered up the PS4 and played through Rocksmith for a while. I'm still finding it hard to get to grasp that thought, that because I could understand it for this application right here in this room, right? In where you're sitting. But I can't grasp it going to a club. But then again, I've got people my age, some of them younger, that can't grasp me taking a Kemper to a gig.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm going to offer my prediction of what I think is going to happen. I think Jim touched on a very important thing. If you want a modeling device, buy it now. I honestly think that's going to be in the next 6 months to 9 months. Anybody who's got a single tube amp that has a repair issue, they're going to need something to get through, and that's where they're going. And they'll probably start at the low end, but some of those guys and gals are going to be looking at the high end instead, because they realize at the time that their thing breaks, I can't be without, and I got to get something else. There's a lot of gigging folks that only have one amp, or maybe an amp and a bad solid state amp as a backup, or they rent a backup, which is another thing that I've come across in my travels. I will say, from my experiences, if you are on the fence about buying something professional level, if you're a professional player, like you're going out and gigging, let's say you're making income from it, and you're like, can I justify buying a Kemper or an Axe FX or a Helix? Yeah, you can. I will say it's a tough sell, especially if you've got a quality amplifier, but I honestly don't see a way forward for this industry long term, given what we know right now. And that could change tomorrow. Stay tuned, because keep watching all these channels and pay attention to the news, and wait for Mike Matthews to come out and say, hey, something's changed. But by all means, prepare yourself in case things don't. I don't want to see people losing gigs, losing potential income because they snoozed and thought this will all blow over. I want to share. Yep. I do want to share this evening before the episode. I was screaming at my PC because I stumbled across a Facebook post, and it was a bunch of people in the Line 6 Helix group basically saying that this is all going to blow over, that there's not really a tube shortage. The prices haven't gone up. I mentioned that earlier in the episode, at tubeampdepot.com, for example, or tubedepot.com. Sorry. And that, this has happened before. It happened in 1989. And that, of course, that's when, New Sensor was acquired. And that this is just, everybody's making a big deal out of nothing. I am here to tell you that is probably bullshit. I don't think those things are true. I get the gut feeling after interacting with my friends online, but also from the news, just seeing what's going on in the world right now. We've just lived through two of the most ridiculous years in human history. The things that we've seen in the last 2 years, I don't care what side of the aisle you are on or whatever. We had a worldwide pandemic. We had people that said the worldwide pandemic wasn't actually happening and were dying from it. Okay. We had race riots in the United States again. We had an insurrection. What? And we now have things like tube shortages, an international war, call it what it is. I mean, if you think at this point that you're going to look at this tube shortage and go, it's just going to blow over. Where are you from? Did you just beam down from the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century, not realizing what day it is? Have you looked outside? Everything's different now. Everything is different. I went to a conference for work yesterday, Sunday. Okay. And we had people on a Zoom call on a 25-foot screen in a room full of about 50 people. And they were interacting as though they were in the room. And this was a thing that would have been unheard of 2 years ago. The landscape has changed. And we sort of have to accept that we have to change too. And I know guitar players are resistant to it, but it's here. Like, it's right in front of us. And if you can't accept that, it's a psychological reaction to the fact that you're not ready for it. And I'm sure that there have been, so like each of the other events I mentioned, and I won't go through them again because they're all politically charged, right? Each of the other events I mentioned, there's a psychological reaction in some part of the community to people going, this isn't real, it's not really happening. Well, I got news for you. It all did.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk to, before we go too far down that, I'm going to talk to a thing that is a large scale psychological response that a lot of people have in the face of something that's coming up. So when I was in management, we talked a lot about this type of thing. Is that when people, and especially in a larger group, and it's kind of like that thing that happens when people get into a riot. They don't go intending to cause a riot. It normally happens because one person does something, but everybody's on this tipping point. And it's kind of like that when it comes to just not wanting to accept the fact that there's bad news coming.
Right. It's exactly what it is.
We experience this on a personal level, whether we lose a pet or a loved one. We don't want to accept that. It's heartbreaking. It's just so emotionally difficult. It's hard to accept on any level. And then, so when all of these people that refuse to accept the fact that something huge has occurred within the world, there's still that person that goes, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. And that person,
it won't affect me.
Right. That person can then convince, because these people want to be convinced. They need to be convinced.
Right.
That it will not affect them. And so that's what happens.
Right. Right. So
it happens in a large scale. And because of social media, it happens even at a larger scale, on an easier scale, because there's a good number of people who don't want to accept that fact. Now, coming back to this and getting out of that political environment, we look at this and we go, there's no way that this could affect us.
Yeah, it is.
At that big a scale.
But get tubes. Go buy some right now.
Geez. Right.
And that's what I was going to say. So when you see people having those kind of conversations, just casually remind yourself, go over to Sweetwater, go over to Guitar Center, go over to your local dealer and ask them if you can get a pair of, 6L6s or EL34s.
Bingo.
From a reputable company. Like, just do it. Go check it out. See what happens. And you'll know. Like, and they'll tell you, well, we have some in stock, but we usually don't. That's what's going to happen. Like, that's where we're sitting right now. So whether you want to believe that JJ, because this is the other thing I saw, was that people were saying JJ is going to supply the world now. JJ is 2 years out on new tubes. When the manufacturers couldn't get stuff from Sino, where do you think they went? They were already buying from New Sensor. They went to JJ. Now you can't get those either. So it's done. This
That's
is
right. You're talking about a company that was providing a third that then was behind because they were trying to provide even more because of the one that was gone. And then now the other one's gone. And so, yeah, that's just not realistic. And how much longer can they hold it up? And how much, I'm sure they've ramped up. That's the other thing we forget, okay? Production of tubes isn't really that important to most of the world. And it's certainly not all that important. We live in this world of ours, right? We lived in this little thing. And we forget that tubes are, again, we talked about this at the beginning. Tubes are not being made for everybody. Oh, tubes for everyone. This is not Oprah giving away a car. Okay, so we're not going to get a big, they're not going to go, whoa, we'll ramp up. You know, it's going to be like the toilet paper shortage. It's going to catch up when it catches up or never at all.
Yeah.
And that's because there really never was a toilet paper shortage, folks. I'm going to take this to the toilet paper thing because I'm going to talk about, because I have a friend of mine who works on toilet paper.
They had literally warehouses filled with it. And you were draining them because you just couldn't handle the fact that there was none on the shelf.
Right, because toilet paper is much like tubes in that it's a JIT or just-in-time product. Right. Toilet paper is expensive to keep in bulk. It's too expensive because it takes up too much space for what it's worth. It's very inexpensive to sell. So therefore, it's truck it in, get it out. Truck it in, get it out. And it's from the manufacturer all the way out. So what's happening is the manufacturers were making their toilet paper. My friend works on rollers. You wouldn't believe they're like the size of a house, making toilet paper all day long, shoving out them little dinky rolls that we put in our bathrooms. And here's the thing: as they were doing that, all of a sudden the supply we go back to that vacuum thing. All of a sudden, everything's off the shelves. So as it came in, they weren't making it any faster. They couldn't. So it came from a warehouse, came to a truck, came from the truck, came to the local distributor, and went out to the stores and went off there. That's as fast as it goes. Toilet paper is just too cheap. It's too inexpensive. There's a great, believe it or not, the show Cracked. You know, remember the old magazine Cracked?
Yeah.
Cracked is still around as a YouTube channel. They just released a thing which I thought was hilarious. It's called "If Toilet Paper Told the Truth" or "If Toilet Paper Was Honest," something like that. Mm-hmm. And you'll see what some of the stuff. But they obviously are going for the comedic route. But my friend was working on those machines. Those machines weren't putting out any more or less. It just finally caught up. The question will be, can tube manufacturing catch up? No, unless we get more tube manufacturers.
Unless somebody goes and does the unthinkable and decides to build something that has been basically dead since the 1970s.
For decades, exactly right. And it's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely.
We talked about it when Sino initially kind of closed up operations, and I really did think that somebody was going to come in and purchase Sino Shiguang. Didn't happen. I really honestly, and then I'd been told by somebody that there was tubes coming out of China again, but what I didn't realize they were hi-fi tubes. And a lot of people have been waiting patiently for the hi-fi tube company to switch production arms over to audio tubes.
Lo-fi guitar tubes. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. Actually, I will say this, though. So, like, if it is kind of funny, the people that buy hi-fi audio equipment, usually they're kind of, like, environmentally focused and stuff. But you're buying tube amps. It's like, what? It just had never occurred to me. Because like everybody else, our listeners, I'm not infallible. Jim's not infallible. I had never really thought about the environmental impact of tubes until now. And for me, this is kind of an awakening, and I consider myself somewhat of an environmentalist. So I try to do the right thing when possible, and it's and reasonable. And this is kind of a wake-up call to me. Like, I'll run my tubes a little longer to make sure that I get my use out of them before I throw them in the garbage. In fact, I've never thrown away a set of tubes unless they're broken. Like if they're non-functional because they melted down or something, then yeah, they go in the garbage. But or get recycled actually. But in the case of my regular tubes, like I run them basically for a year and then I swap them out and I keep them in a box because never know, you know. I'd always thought that, and like now I'm kind of like I'm glad I did that, but I know this is not sustainable. And I know I need to get on the bandwagon with some sort of product that I can grow with and continue to get replacements for. I sort of understand that as much as I don't want to go back to Kempers and Helixes and stuff, I'm taking a really hard look at the Axe FX right now because I'm like, it's the only one I haven't had, and quite frankly, they've all done the job well enough. But can I live with it? You know, do I have a choice? I'm still going to play guitar. I want to play guitar regardless. And so that's going to be the drive forward. But it's like, wow, this is just not what I expected to be doing right now.
Yep.
So. Yep.
Well, I think that kind of brings it to a close.
Well, so let's do a gig report. If you got gig information to share, we can keep it short and light, and then we'll get out of here.
All right.
So what do you got?
So since the last time we talked, because it's been a little while, I had a gig, and it was kind of fun. I'll be real quick. It was a small place. When I say small, I'm talking practically standing on each other's heads to be in there.
Was your Kemper too big for the floor?
My Kemper was literally too big for the floor. I took my Blues Junior and had it behind me. And we did a Thursday night. Let me just say, I'll just say this. I'll say two important things about the gig, and then we'll just go from there. Number one, I never expected a Thursday night to be packed all the way to close at 12:30 in the morning.
That's post-pandemic, my friend.
I was like, wow.
Ready for business.
we had people packed in that place till 12:30 a.m. That was number one. It was really small. Number two, I got to give credit where credit is due. The band, really shined. Me and the other guitar player, we had our amps like literally right side by side, and found sonic space to be able to, okay, where's mine and where's his, and be able to make that happen. And the crowd was very appreciative. Usually if I have to go into a little place like that, I'd say, I don't care, it's not worth it, but I loved it. We have an upcoming gig we have 3 upcoming gigs in April, and 2 of them are down by Kitty Hawk. So we're going to be down in that strip of North Carolina that kind of you never want to be during hurricane season. But we're going to be out there in April, and I'm really looking forward to that because it's bike week, and I'm gonna bring the Marshall, and I'm gonna turn that bad boy up, and I'm gonna let her ring. I might even go stereo and go Marshall, Tone Master, and just push some air. I'm in dire need of some real freaking volume. So that's what's going on there.
So that's your gig report. You don't have anything else to share? All right. Yep. I did an open jam last week. It was fun. I took my Mark. Oh yeah, actually, I do have some stuff. I was gonna say I don't really have much to talk about, but I took my Mark V out actually to open jam, and I ran that with my little pedal board, which had my King of Tone on it. My JHS Unicorn and the Delay Llama XL, and I actually ran 4 cable. So I went all out. I got head and cap. I got my pedal board. I've got to a jam, right?
Right.
And so two things happened that were kind of funny. Number one, I realized I forgot a cable, so I ended up using my wireless, which actually worked out really well. Because normally I bring cables just because I don't want any situations. And I realized, oh shit, you got 3 cables, but you need 4. And so I tried to pack as extremely light as I could, at least cable wise. And then so like after I got done, host Sam Wyatt comes up to me and says, hey, this gentleman here needs to use your amplifier. And I look on stage and there's a guy with a 12 string acoustic. And I was like, what? Like, what?
Are you kidding?
I'm like, do you realize that my amplifier is like a high gain, like it's a beast, right? And it's not made for that. And I think the gentleman that wanted to use it had looked at it and goes, well, it's wicker grill. Like that looks like an acoustic amplifier.
No.
So they didn't have an extra DI box. I was told that, so I said, fine. So I get up on stage. This joker has his preamp gain on his guitar turned all the way up when we plug in. So first thing, look, not everybody knows this, so it's worth sharing this information. If you're going to do the acoustic open jam thing and you get a preamp on your guitar because you're running pickups, turn your volume down when you plug in. Just because it's going to feedback. I actually didn't care so much in my situation because my amp, it's going to clip. The amp's going to clip before the speaker blows.
Right, you're not going to blow.
But in a hi-fi, or not hi-fi, but like a full range situation, yeah, that could be bad, real bad. So I plug him in, and it just wildly feeds back. So I grab the master and turn it down, put it on standby, and I'm like, dude, turn your preamp gain down halfway. I'm like, just put it halfway. So I slowly bring the master up, and I'm sitting there and I'm tweaking the tone controls. I mean, this sounds like garbage through my amp. Put it on skinny clean and just kind of get them as flat as I can make it. Put the EQ basically flat and then play with the mid-range a bit to get them sounding okay. And of course, Sam Wyatt, he's the host and he's also the sound guy. Turn around, he's like, sounds good. I'm like, I don't know what you're listening to, but I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. So I just I climbed off the stage and watched the debacle ensue because it did not sound good, and he was like barely audible because it's not designed to do that. And
right.
I've seen other acoustic players who will plug into an electric guitar amp, and I'm like, really? Like you can't bring a $20 Behringer DI with you.
I know, right?
It's as far as I'm concerned, it's necessary kit if you're playing acoustic guitar to have some sort of DI. Cheap. Yep. Buy the cheapest piece of shit. I had a friend growing up. His dad always said, "Buy the cheapest piece of shit." That's what he used to say. Buy the cheapest piece of shit you can get and take it to the jam so that you at least have something if they don't have a DI. Yep. And he used to go buy cars, and he would go up to the car dealer and he'd go, I want the cheapest piece of shit you have. I might have actually told that story on the show before, but that was probably a long time ago. But anyway, so that was the open jam. I do want to take this opportunity to plug two of my friends' bands. So on Friday, they will be performing at Pollyanna Music out in St. Charles as Bronson Rock Trio. I'm going to be nice because I know that it's a trio now, and they are branded as the Bronson Rock Trio, even though it used to be Bronson Rock Quartet. So Bronson Rock Trio will be there. They're going to be opening up for Sam Wyatt, the host band, Covington Groove. Both of those bands are really good. If you're a fan of the show, you live in the Chicago area, you got nothing going on Friday, come out and see them. I'm going to be there. Probably going to be doing work while I'm there too. But yeah, just, come out, enjoy the excellent show. Last time I saw Covington Groove, they just brought that place down. They were opening for Mark Letary actually. And it was, I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to see these guys again. So, and of course I've seen Bronson Rock a dozen times at this point, and they're always good. So, sure. Promoting other people, right? And then I actually wanted to share just a bit of news before we end the show. I am in the midst of recording an EP with a new project.
Oh.
And that's why the show's been late. I am literally struggling to keep up with that and work right now. We lost 6 employees in 1 month in a company of what is now 17 people. And so now we are just struggling to keep up. So my days are I'm running all day long. And I am behind in literally everything I'm doing. Work, personal, podcast, because this is a labor of love, but I put this as a separate position than my personal life. And I cannot get enough time to edit episodes. So this episode's going to come out before. We've got at least two in the pipe. One of them is an interview with Dylan Talks Tone, which I'm really excited to share with you guys. That was done about 3 weeks ago. And then another episode, we have another episode that was done 2 weeks prior to this one that will actually come out after this one. Please stay tuned. I hope they come out soon. This will go up tomorrow. I'm not even going to put the bumpers on this episode. We're just going to post it.
No, we're just...
And in fact, I'll do that for the audio version too. The bumpers will return. I promise. It's just, I want to make sure this gets out and I don't want to have it wait. And I want to make sure that we don't have an episode gap. So,
all right.
All right. I've been David.
I've been Jim.
And tonight we've been Practical Guitarists.
We have.